The Luna ring struck the silver tray with a sound sharper than any blade in Moonspire. Elara Vale stared at the pale circle left around her finger, while 300 wolves watched in silence. Across the dais, Alpha King Cassian Thorne stood beside Lady Seraphine Voss, his jaw rigid, his black ceremonial coat fastened with the royal wolf seal. The second Luna chair had already been stripped of Elara's name. By emergency decree, Chancellor Malrek Voss announced, unfolding a parchment edged in black wax. Elara Vale is charged with diverting winter grain, exposing the eastern defenses, and concealing a condition that prevents the birth of a royal heir. Murmurs moved through the hall. Seraphine lowered her eyes with practiced sorrow. Cassian did not look at Elara. He had faced armies without flinching, yet avoided her gaze as if ashamed already. Elara lifted the notice. The signature attributed to her curved too heavily at the final stroke. More telling was the watermark beneath Malrek's thumb. A raven, the private crest of House Voss, not Cassian's royal wolf. Her pulse slammed against her mate mark, but her voice remained level. I invoke the right of moon trial. Open the ledgers. Question the quartermasters. Let the pack see every page before judgment falls. The northern armies move before dawn, Cassian said. His voice carried the velvet force of Alpha Command, pressing against every spine in the hall. There is no time. Elara's knees threatened to bend. Her wolf clawed inside her, wounded by his distrust and still bound to him. She locked both legs. Then you are not postponing justice, she said. You are burying it because the truth is inconvenient to you. A flicker crossed Cassian's face. Regret, perhaps. Fear, certainly. Then Seraphine touched his arm, and pride sealed him again. Give me the ring, Elara. The command struck her bones. Around them, elders lowered their eyes. Guards tightened their grips on ceremonial spears. No one stepped forward. Cassian descended the dais himself, stopped before her, and reached for the symbol she had earned through 3 winters of famine, treaties, and blood. His fingers were warm. The moonstone was cold. When he pulled the ring free, pain flashed from Elara's hand to her chest, and the mate bond twisted like wire behind her ribs. Seraphine extended her left hand. Cassian placed the ring on it. The stone gave one faint, dark pulse. Only Elara noticed. Seraphine smiled as applause began in scattered, frightened fragments, then spread because silence had become dangerous there. Cassian leaned closer. Stay in the eastern cottage. I will provide an allowance. When this crisis passes, I still need your counsel. That wounded her more cleanly than the accusation. He intended to display Seraphine as queen and keep Elara hidden as the mind behind his throne. You cannot discard me publicly and possess me privately, Elara said. You chose your Luna. You do not get to keep her shadow. Malrek pushed a second document across the table. It granted Elara a residence, guards, and a royal stipend in exchange for silence. She read only the first line. Then she took the coronation dagger from its velvet cushion. Several guards shifted. Cassian's eyes flashed gold. Elara turned the blade inward, cut her left palm, and pressed blood beneath a sentence. I relinquish the royal residence. I confess to no crime. Blood soaked the parchment. Cassian stared at it, finally understanding that she had prepared to lose everything except herself. Elara, he said, softer now. For one dangerous heartbeat, she remembered his hands warming hers over maps, his mouth against her temple after battle, his promise that no counsel would stand between them. Then she looked at Seraphine wearing her ring and at the empty chair where her name had been. She turned toward the doors. No one stopped her. The wolves she had fed through winter parted without meeting her eyes. Behind her, Malrek resumed the ceremony while Cassian remained silent, one hand clenched beside the royal seal. Elara crossed the threshold. Outside, snow touched the blood on her palm. She opened the accusation beneath a torch. The false signature mattered. The altered ledger mattered. But the watermark changed everything. All right, dear friends, we have reached the part where I gently ask for your help and where the Alpha King pretends he is not impatient. Our channel is still very young. We do not have a grand castle, a royal army, or even a magical wolf at the office. What we do have is a sincere desire to bring you stories filled with kindness, emotion, love, and a little laughter. If we are doing something well, please support us with a subscription or a like. If we are doing something poorly, please tell us kindly in the comments. We are here to learn, not to pretend we are perfect. Your support helps this small storytelling family grow. Thank you, my friends. Now, the Alpha King would like his story back. Snow followed Elara beyond Moonspire, falling hard enough to erase the road behind her. She welcomed that mercy. Beneath her cloak, the council notice crackled against her ribs, its false signature and raven watermark heavier than armor. Blood from her left palm had soaked through the bandage she tied with her teeth. Every few steps, the mate bond tightened, dragging her thoughts back toward Cassian, his hand removing the ring, his silence, while Seraphine smiled. Elara pressed her mother's moonstone pendant to her throat and kept walking. Returning would save her body. It would also destroy what remained of her. Near dawn, she reached the lightning-scarred boundary stone. The moment her boot crossed it, the pack bond tore loose. Elara folded to her knees as agony ripped through her chest and spine. The forest vanished behind white sparks. She heard wolves in the distance, perhaps guards, perhaps hunters sent by Malrek. Panic forced her upright. She staggered downhill, coughing until copper filled her mouth. At the roadside, her legs failed. Rain replaced snow, cold needles striking her face. She curled around the pendant, refusing the instinct screaming for Cassian, and whispered to the darkness, "You do not own my survival." Marabelle found her before sunrise, half-conscious beside a drainage ditch. The human nurse loaded Elara into an aging truck, without asking whether she carried fangs. At the clinic, antiseptic and peppermint replaced wet pine. Mara cleaned the reopened wound, listened to Elara's lungs, and frowned at the bruising around her mate mark. "Royal wolves," she muttered, adjusting the lamp. "All that gold, and none of it buys common sense." Elara almost laughed. The sound became a gasp when Mara pressed an instrument against her abdomen. A heartbeat fluttered through the room, too small and too fast to be Elara's. Elara stared at the ceiling while Mara repeated the examination. 6 weeks, perhaps a little more. The timing reached backward with merciless precision. Before the accusation, before Seraphine wore her cloak, before Cassian decided she could not give him an heir. Mara placed the medical file beside her. The results were clear. Elara was healthy. The child was alive. Fear arrived before joy. Under Crown Heir law, a baby carrying Cassian's blood could be taken from a mother convicted of treason. Elara covered her stomach with hands, one bandaged, one trembling. "He cannot know," she said. Mara did not argue. By afternoon, a wanted notice appeared outside the clinic. Elara saw it through rain-streaked glass, her face rendered severe, her name printed beneath traitor in black capitals. The notice accused her of stealing royal funds and abandoning Moonspire to aid foreign enemies. At the bottom, lettering cited the law she feared. Any child discovered in her custody would be removed and returned alive to the crown. Mara tore the paper down, but another waited across the street. "This was printed before you reached the border," she said. Elara touched the raven watermark. Malrek had planned her disappearance before Cassian chose. Mara locked the clinic and drew the curtains. She offered shelter, but Elara knew soldiers would search each room by nightfall. Survival required a different face. She cut her hair to her shoulders over a metal basin, watching strands cover the blood-stained bandage in her lap. She removed the last royal embroidery from her cloak and burned it in the stove. On a blank transit form, she wrote E. Vale, the only name she would keep. Not Luna, not traitor, not anyone's advisor. Mara returned with cash, food, and a freight schedule bound for Grayhaven. "You need distance and witnesses." At dusk, Mara drove her to a freight yard beyond town. Rain hammered the truck roof, while guards searched passenger platforms nearby. Elara climbed into a grain car, carrying one bag, the medical file, and the pendant that had belonged to her mother. Before closing the door, Mara gripped her uninjured hand. "Whatever they call you, protect the truth." The train jolted forward. Elara rested against the wooden wall, one palm over the life inside her. Through a crack, she saw another notice nailed beside the tracks. If the fugitive is pregnant, the child must be recovered alive at once. By the time the freight train reached Grayhaven, Elara had memorized every rattle of its wheels. The grain car smelled of dust, salt, and old wood. but the harbor beyond smelled of fish oil and rain. Mara jumped down first, then turned to help her. Elara refused the hand, until a wave of dizziness forced humility. Around them, hungry children waited beside locked warehouses, while merchants shouted over missing cargo. Elara stopped beside a delivery board covered in chalk marks. 3 shipments of winter grain had entered the port that week, yet none had reached the public stores. She traced the dates, then compared them with wagon mud still drying on the quay. "The grain never left Grayhaven," she said. Mara followed her gaze toward a warehouse guarded by men wearing mismatched boots. Elara noticed identical black pitch beneath every heel. A broad man stepped from the harbor office before they could approach. Rowan Blackwood wore no crown, only a weathered coat and an iron compass at his belt. But every wolf nearby straightened. His amber eyes moved from Elara's bandaged palm to her pale face. "Travelers need permits," he said. "Fugitives need better lies." Elara met his stare. "And ports need honest ledgers. Yours are bleeding money." He almost smiled there. Inside Rowan's office, ledgers covered a scarred table. He folded his arms while Elara opened the newest volume. "You have 30 days of grain missing," she said, "but only 12 days of false invoices. Someone is stealing from storage, not shipping." Rowan tapped the page. "You reached that conclusion in 2 minutes." "1 minute," Elara replied. "The other was spent wondering why your clerks alphabetized by ship color." Mara coughed. Rowan looked toward Mara, who examined the ceiling with suspicious innocence. "What do you want?" he asked. Elara placed the wanted notice beside the ledger but kept the pregnancy page hidden beneath her sleeve. "A room, food, and protection from Silver Crown law for 30 days. In return, I find your thief." Rowan studied the raven watermark, then her bruised mate mark. "No title? Titles are expensive. I prefer contracts." He offered her a narrow room above Warehouse 9 and one rule: no access to military records. Elara accepted, then asked for shift rosters, cart weights, lamp oil receipts, and every broken seal collected that month. Rowan raised an eyebrow. "That sounds military. It sounds like arithmetic." He gave her the papers. For the first time since Moonspire, someone tested her ability instead of demanding obedience. It frightened her less. Elara spent 3 days mapping movement through the port. Pregnancy nausea struck each dawn, forcing her to pause behind stacked crates until Mara pressed ginger into her hand. By noon she changed seal colors, reassigned 2 guards, and announced a false shipment of silver medicine. That night, Rowan watched from a roof as 3 warehouse workers rolled empty barrels toward the quarantined pier. Elara whispered, "Now follow the quietest one." The quietest worker led them beneath Warehouse 4, where stolen grain filled a cellar beside crates stamped with House Voss's raven. When armed men emerged, Rowan reached for his blade. Elara stopped him and pulled the fire lever instead. Iron shutters crashed down, dividing the smugglers into separate rooms. "Ports are puzzles," she said through the bars. "Violence is what people use when they cannot solve them." Rowan stared. The captured quartermaster lasted less than an hour. He confessed Council Silver had paid him to starve Grayhaven until Rowan accepted Silver Crown oversight. Mara found payment records hidden inside a flour barrel. Elara copied every entry before Rowan sealed the cellar. Then he placed a 30-day contract before her. "You earned this," he said. Elara signed carefully, protecting her injured palm. Outside, children finally received grain. She watched silently. Later, Rowan carried 1 recovered ledger to his private study. Its coded margin notes matched letters that had guided emergency shipments to Ashen Coast 3 winters earlier, saving hundreds during fever season. He remembered the unsigned Royal Trade Keeper reports and the precise slant of every number. Below, Elara crossed the courtyard with Mara, one hand resting briefly over her hidden child. Rowan opened the wanted notice and recognized her. 3 days after Rowan recognized her handwriting, he led Elara, beyond Grayhaven's northern cliffs, to an abandoned trading post carved into black stone. Mara remained at the harbor, guarding Elara's medical file. Rain slicked the mountain path, and every step pulled at the bruised mate mark beneath Elara's collar bone deep. Rowan carried the recovered ledger beneath his coat. He had not confronted her about Moonspire. Instead, he had asked whether she could identify the raven-marked delivery route. Elara had answered yes, because questions about evidence felt safer than questions about the king who had torn the ring from her hand. The trading post appeared deserted, its doors chained and its windows blind with dust, yet fresh boot prints scarred the mud. Elara crouched, nausea rising sharply, and studied the pattern. 12 men had entered. Only 8 had left. "There is another exit," she whispered. Rowan's eyes shifted toward the mountain. The first bolt struck where Elara's throat had been. Rowan dragged her behind a fallen cart as mercenaries emerged from the upper windows. He reached for his sword. But Elara saw iron grooves crossing the floor, remnants of an old warehouse system. "Wait," she said. "Bring them down to us." She kicked loose a rusted brake. Counterweights groaned inside the walls, and 3 cargo doors crashed shut, separating the attackers. Rowan stared once, then followed her signal. His fighters entered through the lower passage, disarming the trapped men room by room. Elara never drew a blade. She controlled the battlefield. One mercenary escaped through a tunnel, descending beneath the post. Elara insisted on following before he could destroy whatever House Voss had hidden. Rowan objected when she stumbled. "You are pale." "I am pregnant, not porcelain," she replied. His silence lasted 3 steps. That would improve planning considerably. Elara expected pity. Rowan offered none. He simply slowed his pace and positioned himself between her and every dark opening. The tunnel ended at a circular stone door, bearing a star enclosed by a crescent moon. Elara's breath stopped. The same symbol rested against her skin inside her mother's pendant. She lifted the moonstone to the carved hollow. It fit perfectly, but nothing moved. Then blood from her reopened palm touched the stone. Blue light spread through the seams. Gears awakened behind the wall, grinding after a century of silence. Rowan stepped beside her as the ancient vault opened slowly. Inside lay an obsidian seal, a rolled blood pact, and 7 metal tablets engraved with forgotten names. Dust smelled of stone and old iron. Elara touched the seal. Cold raced through her veins, then became heat. The nearest tablet illuminated one line: Elara Asterian Vale, daughter of the founder's house. Rowan unrolled the charter, while Elara read the lineage twice, searching for deception. Her mother's name appeared beneath the last sovereign guardian, marked exiled, presumed dead. House Asterian had written the original Moon Accord. Its surviving heir could establish an independent dominion beyond pack law, but inheritance alone granted nothing. The charter demanded 3 years of defended territory, 3 communities bound by voluntary oath, protected granaries, and equal sanctuary for wolves without packs. Elara looked at the abandoned maps. "A bloodline is not a kingdom," she said. Rowan nodded. "You know how to build what blood alone cannot buy." A scrape sounded behind them. The escaped mercenary appeared with a torch, aiming it toward the blood pact. Elara seized the old map table and shoved it into his knees. Rowan disarmed him before the flame fell. In the man's coat, they found a torn page bearing Malrek Voss's cipher. Someone had removed the next page from the bloodline record years earlier. The missing section listed possible descendants and their last known locations. Malrek had not discovered Elara after Moonspire. He had been searching for House Asterian before Cassian chose Seraphine. Rowan offered to hide the vault in her identity. Elara closed her fingers around the founder's seal. She would not trade one secret throne for another cage. She would remain at Grayhaven, protect her child, and build something people chose freely. When her blood touched the obsidian again, 3 dead signal towers ignited. One burned inside Silver Crown territory. More than 5 years after the Asterian vault opened, morning bells rang across a city that had not existed when Elara arrived at Grayhaven. Stone warehouses lined the harbor, schools occupied former barracks, and 3 communities flew the black and silver Asterian banner by choice, not conquest. Elara stood at the long council table, 36 now. Her smoke-silver wolf settled beneath her skin, while merchants, healers, and rogue families argued over winter tariffs. She listened until every voice had been heard. Then she opened the brown trade ledger and divided harbor taxes between grain reserves, clinic repairs, and orphan housing. No alpha command, only clear law and the trust Elara had earned through 5 winters of shortages, storms, and rebuilding kept the room silent when she finished. The northern traders may appeal within 7 days, she said. Until then, no child loses bread so a councilman can protect his profit. Lyra burst through the doors before anyone answered, dark curls escaping their ribbon and a small moonstone pendant bouncing against her coat. "Mama!" Everyone bowed again. Elara gathered her 4-year-old daughter into one arm. "They respect the work, starling." Lyra studied the crowded chamber. "Good. Blood seems messier." Rowan coughed suspiciously behind them. He was 43 now, broader at the shoulders and threaded with silver at both temples. He had spent those years defending Asterian's sea lanes, challenging Elara's harsher plans, and never asking for the bond she was not ready to give. Their closeness lived in shared maps, midnight arguments, and the iron compass he left beside her tea whenever storms delayed him. Today, however, his humor faded as Mara placed 3 sealed requests on the table. Silver Crown's western packs needed grain. Its soldiers had gone unpaid for 2 months. Asterion was already feeding refugees crossing Cassian's border. Elara read silently. Far away, Moonspire smelled of cold stone and empty kitchens. Cassian Thorne, 40 and still feared across 9 packs, stood inside the royal granary, while a quartermaster explained why half the shelves were bare. 3 packs had withheld taxes. 2 supply captains had resigned. The Eastern road system had collapsed because no one understood Elara's contingency codes. Cassian opened an old ledger and found her notes in the margins. Warnings about council debt, false tariffs, and dependence on northern armies. Every prediction had come true. Seraphine entered, wearing white fur and the cracked Luna ring. "The anniversary coronation requires roses," she said, glancing at the empty bins as though famine were an unpleasant decoration. Cassian closed the ledger slowly. 3 villages requested flour. Father will manage it. Seraphine adjusted the moonstone, hiding the black fracture beneath her glove. He always does. Once, Cassian had mistaken dependence for obedience, and obedience for stability. Now council decrees arrived. Before his own orders reached the gates, he dismissed Seraphine and remained alone with Elara's handwriting. The mate bond, stretched across years in silence, gave one sudden painful pull. He gripped the table until the wood split beneath his fingers. She was not dead. That evening, a courier delivered Asterian's relief contract under armed escort. The parchment offered grain to Silver Crown's poorest packs without interest, provided local leaders, not Moonspire officials, controlled distribution. Cassian recognized the structure immediately. Elara had used identical safeguards during the famine before his coronation. At the bottom rested a black wax seal, a star held inside a crescent moon. His pulse stumbled. Years earlier, he had sketched the symbol from the pendant she wore against her throat. He ordered every record concerning Asterion brought to his chamber. No advisors, no council scribes, especially no member of House Voss nearby. In Asterion, Elara approved the shipment, without knowing whose hands would open the contract. Lyra sat on the window ledge, swinging her boots above the harbor. "Are we helping people who hurt you?" she asked. Elara fastened the child's moonstone pendant and considered the answer. "We are feeding people who were never asked what their rulers did." Rowan leaned against the doorway, quiet approval in his amber eyes. Beyond him, wagons rolled toward Silver Crown. Inside Moonspire, Cassian placed Asterian's seal beside his faded drawing of Elara's pendant. The curves matched perfectly. His hand went still. Elara had survived him. Rowan waited until Lyra was asleep before summoning Elara to the war room. Rain pressed silver lines against the windows, and the recovered House Voss sea chest sat open beneath 3 lamps. Inside lay payment ledgers, border maps, and a medical file sealed with royal wax. Elara recognized her name before Rowan spoke. The paper smelled of salt, mildew, and blood, as though someone had tried to drown the truth. She opened the file and found the examination performed 6 weeks before her exile. Fertile, pregnant, no hereditary defect. Beneath it rested the forged report Malrek had presented in Moonspire, declaring her barren and unstable. Both carried Cassian's seal, but the original order used blue royal ink, while the forgery used council black. Her fingers went numb. 5 years of fear rested on a lie written before her daughter existed. Rowan watched her read in silence. He had found the chest 2 days earlier when Ashen Coast patrols intercepted a Voss merchant ship sailing under false human papers. Elara closed the file too carefully. You waited. I verified every seal. You decided what truth I could survive. His jaw tightened. I decided you deserved certainty, not another weapon disguised as evidence. The mate mark beneath her collar burned, humiliating. Anger protected her from the tremor in her hands. Rowan did not apologize for caution, and she did not forgive him quickly. Yet when she looked again, he had placed the file within her reach, rather than keeping it as leverage. That distinction mattered. Next time, she said, you bring me uncertainty, and let me judge it. Rowan nodded once. Next time, I trust you before I trust my fear. Behind the medical papers, Mara uncovered invoices linking Moon Council silver to the border raids that had forced Cassian into Seraphine's alliance. The attacks were staged. Villages had burned so Malrek could manufacture urgency, and royal seals had been copied during a council session when Cassian never left the Great Hall. Elara saw the pattern. Malrek had not reacted to her power. He had built the crisis to remove it. Another page bore an order to capture Elara alive if pregnancy was confirmed. Beside it, Malrek had written that the unborn heir could secure both the crown and the Asterian bloodline. Lyra's existence was not merely dangerous because Cassian was her father. She was the living bridge between two sovereign claims. Elara's fear sharpened into purpose. We file for recognition now, she said. Before they decide, my daughter is territory. Founder's charter required Asterian's sovereign to appear before the Great Council with proof of defended land, voluntary oaths, protected granaries, and 3 recognized communities. Elara had every condition. What she lacked was safety. Returning to Moonspire meant entering the hall where Cassian had stripped her name away. It tightened her lungs. She pressed palms against the table until the room steadied. Fear could advise her. It would not command her. Lyra appeared at the doorway in her nightdress, clutching the moonstone pendant. A guard behind her muttered that traitors' children should not enter war rooms. The air changed instantly. Gold circled Lyra's green eyes, and an invisible pressure drove the guard to one knee. Cups rattled across the table. Elara reached her daughter, wrapping her arms around the child until the alpha aura faded. Rowan dismissed the guard without mercy. Mara knelt beside Lyra and checked her pulse while Elara fought to hide her alarm. Alpha blood had awakened years too early, stirred by threat and shame. Rowan set the Founder's charter beside the medical file. They will discover her. Elara looked at Lyra, who apologized to the cups. Then they discover her behind our laws, our witnesses, and the oath this dominion has earned. Her decision settled through the room. Before dawn, Elara sealed the petition for sovereign recognition. A messenger returned an hour later with the council's response, delivered fast. The petition would be heard only during Seraphine's anniversary coronation, before alphas, elders, and foreign envoys in Moonspire. It was a trap designed to place Elara beneath the Luna ring. She broke the black wax and smiled without warmth. This time, she would enter that hall carrying a kingdom. Seraphine's scream stopped the coronation fitting. The Luna ring glowed against her finger, its moonstone split by a black vein of trapped smoke. A healer rushed forward, but the instant he touched the ring, silver fire licked across Seraphine's skin. She tore her hand away, breathing hard. "Cover it," she ordered. "No one sees this before the ceremony." The healer lowered his eyes and reached for another layer of enchantment. On the dressing table lay a second medical file, this one claiming Seraphine had recently miscarried Cassian's heir. No child had ever existed. Years earlier, Malrek had purchased blood from a pregnant servant, bribed 3 healers, and turned Seraphine's monthly illnesses into a royal tragedy. "If Elara enters Moonspire," the healer whispered, "the ring may reject you publicly." Seraphine seized his collar. "Then make certain Elara never reaches the hall." Cassian found the treasury records before noon. Payments marked as border repairs led instead to private Voss accounts, hired blades, and shipments of preserved blood. He summoned Seraphine to the council chamber and placed the ledgers between them. "Tell me these are forged." Her face whitened, then hardened. Elara forged worse. Cassian's wolf surged beneath his skin. "Do not speak her name to avoid answering me." For once, Seraphine did not tremble. She is bringing an army disguised as merchants, Seraphine said. Asterion intends to strip you of the crown, and Rowan Blackwood intends to claim what remains. Cassian looked at the Luna ring. A faint curl of smoke escaped beneath her glove. Once, he mistook fear for innocence. Now, he heard calculation. Leave the ring on the table. Seraphine stepped back. It belongs to me. No, he said. It never did. At the eastern road, Elara's convoy moved through sleet under Asterion banners. Mara rode inside the medicine wagon with Lyra, while Rowan's scouts ranged ahead. The first arrow struck the lead driver through the shoulder. A second shattered a bottle of fever tonic beside Mara's head. Elara dropped from her horse, smelled lamp oil on the wind, and saw masked attackers circling the wagons. They want the medicine burning, she said. Not stolen. Rowan reached for his sword, but Elara pointed toward a narrow stone bridge behind them. Faint left. Let them believe we are retreating. Asterion guards shifted formation, drawing the attackers onto the bridge. At Elara's signal, wagons released brake chains. Empty barrels thundered downhill, breaking the enemy line without crushing the trapped horses. Rowan captured the commander alive, while Elara dragged Mara from the smoking wagon. Half their winter medicines burned anyway. The loss struck harder than blood. Those medicines were meant for children in 3 border settlements. Elara stood among broken glass and wet ash, jaw tight, while Lyra clung to Mara inside an armored carriage. Rowan wanted the prisoner executed before reinforcements arrived. Dead men do not testify, Elara said. She searched the commander's coat and found Seraphine's private seal sewn beneath the lining. Beside it rested a security crystal wrapped in black velvet. They activated it beneath a travel lantern. Static filled the air, followed by Malrek's voice and Seraphine's answer. The recording captured payments for the border raids, instructions to maintain the false miscarriage story, and an order to destroy Asterion's medical stores before the coronation. Then, the crystal skipped. Elara tightened her grip until its edges bit her palm. Seraphine sounded frightened, but she never refused. Fear had become her excuse for every cruelty. Back in Moonspire, Cassian ordered Seraphine confined to her rooms. Malrek overruled him before the guards reached the corridor, citing coronation immunity. The Chancellor's authority moved faster than the king's. Cassian finally understood how completely the council had colonized his throne. He sent one trusted rider toward Asterion with a warning. House Voss planned bloodshed inside the Great Hall. The rider never passed the western gate. At the ruined convoy, the crystal cleared once more. Malrek's voice returned, colder than the sleet. The child carries both crowns. When she appears, kill the mother first. The bloodline will accept a guardian. Elara looked toward Lyra, and every remaining softness in her face became steel. They were no longer hunting Asterion. They were hunting her daughter. Moonspire's gates opened beneath a sky the color of forged steel. 5 years earlier, Elara had left through a servant road with blood on her palm and snow in her hair. Now she returned at the head of 12 black carriages, 30 mounted guards, 3 elected representatives, and wagons carrying medicine for villages Silver Crown had failed to protect. Asterion banners rose behind her like a verdict long overdue today. Cassian waited inside the gatehouse wearing the royal black, older now, harder around the eyes. He had expected a foreign sovereign. When Elara stepped from the first carriage, his wolf surged so violently that every guard lowered his head. She wore no Luna ring, only the obsidian founder's seal at her throat. Rowan descended after her and stopped pace away. He did not touch her until Elara offered her hand. Cassian's gaze fell to their joined hands, then to the delegates behind her. Merchants, healers, widows, rogue parents, and human officials stood beneath Asterion colors without fear. None bowed because of Alpha Command. They bowed when Elara passed because they chose to. The realization struck Cassian harder than any accusation. He had once believed she needed his throne. She had built a nation where no throne could silence her again. He requested a private audience before the coronation bells. Elara allowed 10 minutes in a council chamber, with Rowan and Mara waiting beyond the doors. Cassian placed the council notice on the table. The raven watermark had faded, but the false signature remained. "Delay the hearing," he said. "Give me 1 day. I can expose Voss without risking you." Elara's face did not change, though pain burned beneath her ribs. 5 years ago, you asked me to be quiet because the moment was inconvenient, she answered. Your fear chose Seraphine. Your silence chose Malrek. My silence would choose them again. Cassian flinched, as if she had struck him. I know what I did. No, Elara said. You know what it cost you. Today you will hear what it cost everyone else. She left before he could mistake regret for permission. The great hall was brighter than the night of her exile, yet colder. Seraphine stood on the dais in white silk, her burned hand hidden beneath a jeweled glove. The Luna ring smoked faintly under the fabric. Malrek occupied the chancellor's seat as though it were a throne. When Elara presented the founder's charter, he laughed. A fugitive cannot create a sovereign state by changing her name and gathering beggars. Elara placed the obsidian seal upon the council table. Then let the law decide what we built. She cut her left palm along the old scar and pressed blood to the stone. White light raced through the floor. Ancient words appeared across the walls, revealing the moon accord and conditions Asterion had fulfilled. 3 community representatives stepped forward with oaths. Malrek's smile vanished when 7 council seals answered Elara's blood. Seraphine rose abruptly. Ask her why she hid the king's heir. The hall erupted. Elara's wolf lunged inside her, not from shame but warning. Lyra was supposed to remain in a protected residence beyond the northern wall. Rowan turned toward the side entrance as Mara appeared, breathless, one sleeve torn. 2 Asterian guards carried a wounded man behind her. The safe house was breached, Mara said. We had no route. Lyra entered, holding her pendant in one fist, and Mara's hand in the other. Her dark curls were damp with snow. Gold circled her green eyes when the crowd pressed closer. Cassian stopped breathing. The mate bond slammed through Elara, carrying his recognition, shock, and a grief so fierce she nearly staggered. He saw his own brow, his black hair, and the alpha light no child of Rowan could possess. Cassian took 1 step down from the dais. Rowan moved between him and Elara, but Elara raised a hand, stopping both men. Lyra studied the king without bowing. She had been taught that rank deserved courtesy, not surrender. Cassian's eyes turned gold as her scent reached him, carrying his blood and Elara's moonstone line together. Lyra looked up at her mother. Mama, is this the man who took your ring? Lyra's question silenced the great hall more completely than any alpha command. Cassian stopped on the lowest step of the dais, his face stripped of every royal defense. Before he could answer, Elara guided Lyra behind Rowan and faced the council. The hearing begins now, she said. No coronation, no private bargain, and no claim upon my child until the truth is judged. Malrek struck the table with his staff, but the founder's seal answered with white fire, illuminating the ancient rite of moon trial across the walls. 7 council seats unlocked. Hundreds of wolves turned toward the evidence silently. Mara placed the original medical file beside the forged report. The date, healer signatures, and blue royal ink proved Elara had been healthy and pregnant before her exile. Gasps rose when the false document showed council black beneath Cassian's copied seal. Elder Silas stepped forward next, leaning on his cane. He admitted Elara had invoked moon trial and that Cassian had refused her. Cassian did not hide behind emergency law. I denied her the protection I swore to uphold, he said. Malrek created the lie, but I gave it power because I feared losing control. The admission shook the hall. Rowan opened the recovered pack ledger and traced payments from House Voss to hired soldiers, false quartermasters, and the men who burned Asterion's medicines. Mara activated the security crystal. Malrek's voice filled the hall, ordering border raids, the false miscarriage, and Elara's capture. Seraphine's replies followed, frightened at first, then deliberate. She had known the medical file was false. She had known Elara carried Cassian's child. When the recording named Lyra, Cassian's claws cut blood into his palms. He looked toward his daughter, but Elara's raised hand kept him where he stood. Fatherhood was not a crown he could claim. Seraphine tore off her glove. The Luna ring had burned a black circle into her skin, and the moonstone pulsed like a dying heart. I wanted one thing that could not be taken from me, she said. Her voice cracked when Malrek ordered her to remain silent. She turned on him instead. You promised the title would make me matter. Malrek laughed, and called her replaceable before the entire kingdom. Something inside Seraphine collapsed. She confessed to buying blood, bribing healers, and signing the convoy attack. Then the enchantment shattered. The ring split apart and struck the stone between them. Malrek moved before the final fragment stopped spinning. He drove his staff into the floor, extinguishing the Founder's light, and armed guards sealed every door. 4 counselors rose beside him. "The trial is void," he declared. "The child will enter council protection." Lyra's alpha aura burst outward, rattling windows, but Elara pulled her close before fear could consume her. Rowan drew his sword. Asterian guards overturned the evidence table into a barricade. Elara had studied the hall's original plans during her years as royal tradekeeper. She pointed toward passages beneath the eastern tapestries. "Lock those first." He brought reserves. The concealed doors opened anyway. Mercenaries flooded the hall, while pack members scattered beneath overturned benches. Rowan defended the witnesses, his blade turning aside silver weapons meant to erase testimony. Elara directed civilians through the western gallery and used ceremonial chains to block the central aisle. Malrek broke through with a silver dagger, aiming past her toward Lyra. Cassian crossed the distance first. The blade entered beneath his ribs. His roar shook dust from the rafters, yet he remained standing long enough to seize Malrek's wrist. Elara wrapped blood-packed chains around the Chancellor, and Founder's fire locked every link. When the surviving guards surrendered, silence returned with the smell of blood and scorched silver. Cassian sank to one knee, one hand pressed over his wound. He ordered Malrek arrested, the 4 counselors stripped of rank, and every charge against Elara suspended pending judgment. Then he placed the royal crown on the floor before her. The Founder's charter appeared again, revealing its final condition. Asterion could not become independent, while its sovereign remained bound to another king. Elara must preserve the mate bond, or sever it publicly before moonset. Cassian bowed his head. "This time, let the choice remain yours." Moonset painted the shattered great hall in silver as healers carried Cassian to the lower chamber. Elara remained beside the Founder's seal, her reopened palm pressed against its cold obsidian surface. Around her, counselors whispered about succession, sovereignty, and scandal. Lyra slept against Mara's shoulder, exhausted by fear. Rowan stood nearby, blood drying along his sleeve. No one urged Elara to hurry. For once, the law waited for her decision alone. At dawn, the surviving council reconvened beneath damaged rafters. Malrek Voss stood chained inside a ring of Founder's fire. The 4 elders who had supported him were stripped of rank, property, and voting rights. Malrek received imprisonment in Moonstone Keep. Seraphine, pale and unadorned, lost the Luna title, the Voss name, and estates purchased with stolen funds. Her restitution oath bound her to rebuild the villages her lies had burned. Elara's name was cleared before every alpha, envoy, and pack representative present. Then Cassian entered, bandaged beneath a black coat, refusing the royal chair. He signed 3 decrees with a hand weakened by silver. Recognition of Asterian dominion, transfer of the Voss ports and stolen treasury funds to Asterion's relief trust, and surrender of automatic custody rights over Lyra. His crown remained on the floor where he had placed it. "I will not ask you to return," Cassian said. His voice held no command. "I will not call saving Lyra payment for what I did. I ask permission to earn whatever place she may choose to give me." Elara studied the man who had believed regret could reopen any door. "Supervised visits," she answered. "No royal claim, no lessons about obedience. Break one condition, and the door closes." Cassian bowed. Before moonset, Elara entered the Founder's circle, with Lyra beside Mara and Rowan beyond the fire. Cassian faced her across the seal. The damaged mate bond tightened, carrying memories of winter maps, quiet laughter, and the night he chose power over truth. Elara did not deny that love had once existed. She denied that love erased consequence. Pressing her blood to the charter, she invoked sovereign severance before the kingdoms. Pain tore through both of them. Cassian dropped to one knee, but he did not reach for her. Elara felt the bond unravel from her ribs, each thread carrying a promise, a betrayal, or a grief she had survived. When the final strand broke, silence filled the space inside her. Not emptiness, silence, clean, unclaimed, and entirely her own. The founder's seal blazed white, recognizing Asterion as an independent nation. Elara returned a fragment of the shattered Luna ring to Cassian. "Keep the symbol," she said. "I kept the work." Then she amended the charter before anyone could declare her bloodline a monarchy. Every future sovereign would face a renewal vote after 7 years. Leadership would remain a responsibility, never an inheritance disguised as destiny. Several alphas protested. The citizens of Asterion answered by striking their hands over their hearts. Weeks later, Asterion's harbor rang with hammers, school bells, and market calls. Seraphine arrived under guard to begin restitution work in a village whose clinic her convoy had destroyed. Malrek disappeared behind Moonstone Keep's gates. Cassian sent no gifts, only reports documenting each condition he had followed during his supervised meeting with Lyra. The child returned unimpressed by royalty but delighted that her father knew how to carve wooden wolves. Rowan found Elara on the Sovereign Hall balcony at sunset, reviewing harbor figures while Lyra negotiated with Mara for a later bedtime. "You built an empire," Rowan said, setting his iron compass beside the ledger. "Yet the smallest citizen remains unconquered." Elara smiled, a sound warmer than victory. Rowan's expression grew serious. "There is no war holding me here now. No oath either. Do you still want me beside you?" Elara closed the ledger. She offered him no crown, mate claim, or authority over Asterion. She held out her hand. Rowan took it carefully, as though choice were more sacred than fate. Below, wolves, humans, widows, rejected mates, and children crossed the square beneath Asterion's flag. Lyra seized their hands and pulled them toward the stairs. Elara followed, free to choose love without surrendering herself. The Empire rose behind her, and this is where Elara's journey closes. "Are you still here with me?" Then perhaps something in her story felt familiar. Maybe you have been betrayed by someone you trusted, misunderstood by people who never asked for the truth, or pushed aside after giving more than anyone noticed. Elara was hurt, but she did not beg for a place in a life that had already dishonored her. She left because staying would have cost her dignity. And when she could not control Cassian, the council, or the lies told about her, she focused on what still belonged to her: her choices, her work, her child, and the kind of person she wanted to become. That may be the quietest form of strength. Not winning every argument, not making everyone regret losing you, simply refusing to let another person's decision become the final definition of your life. She built an empire, changed ancient law, and still had to negotiate bedtime with a 4-year-old. Power, apparently, has limits. If Elara's story reminded you to choose yourself without becoming cruel, comment one word: dignity. And if this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe for more stories about women who walked away without losing their hearts.